Hi, welcome to my channel. My name's Bria and I make hand-poured beeswax candles. So today I wanted to discuss how can you tell if the candle you bought is really a pure 100% beeswax candle or have things been added, filler waxes been added to it. So paraffin or soy or even coconut oil, okay? So before I even start the video, I just want to say it's okay to add those things to your candle. You know, when people create candles, they decide, do they want to make a 100% beeswax candle or do they prefer to add things to it? A lot of people add coconut oil and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes what happens is people buy a beeswax candle and they think they're buying a 100% beeswax candle, but things have been added to it. Or even when you go to the store and you buy beeswax, maybe it's been cut with something and you want to know, did you really get pure beeswax? So I'm going to give you some helpful tips to decide whether or not you really have a beeswax candle or you bought pure beeswax. So my first thing is I want to show you some characteristics of a pure beeswax candle. So the first thing you're going to notice, this is a 100% beeswax candle that I made. And the first thing you're going to notice about it is it doesn't adhere fully to the jar. So a 100% beeswax candle shrinks as it cools. So what some people will do is they will warm the jar up or they'll pour the wax at a cooler temperature, but no matter what you do to it, it's still going to shrink even a little bit. You're going to be able to tell that it shrunk. So if you look at this candle, I'm going to try to get close. You're going to notice that it's not fully sticking to the jar. Okay, and I'll even show you with a butter knife. I can stick this whole butter knife down in the jar. Okay, that's how much room there is. Okay, and even in my clear jar, you can see where part of it's sticking, but most of it, it's not sticking. So beeswax is never going to fully adhere to a glass jar. All right, the second thing you're going to look for in a pure beeswax candle is beeswax, as it cools and hardens, it will squeak if you rub your finger on it. And I'm going to show you some other blends. They act totally different when you rub your finger. So I'm going to hold this up to the microphone and you're going to hear, you should be able to hear that. It squeaks when you rub your finger against it. And when you rub your finger against it, nothing comes off on your finger. And this one has essential oil in it. So even with essential oil, it still has the same squeak. So this one right here, which I've burned a little bit, it doesn't have any essential oil. This is all beeswax and it's the same thing. I rub my finger against it, it squeaks. Okay. If you have a candle that's not squeaking, then it's probably not 100% beeswax. But you have to make sure it's either a freshly poured candle, like you watch the wax harden, or you have lit the candle, you formed a full wax pool, and then it squeaks. Because if the candle, when it's shipped to you, if it's got ridges on it, which this one does, this is 100% beeswax, it has a little squeak, but not too much because there's so many little ridges on it that my finger's catching on. You want to make sure it's super smooth, like it's just cooled down, and you'll hear that squeak. I call it the beeswax squeak. Beeswax will always squeak. All right, and the last thing about your beeswax candle is at the end of the candle, there should be very minimal sooting. So in this jar here, I've probably poured and burned about 10 to 15 different beeswax candles, and there's almost no soot on this candle jar. There is one little burn spot right here. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but there's almost no sooting in that jar. And this has burned. You can see it's, you know, it's got residue wax in it, but there's no sooting on that. Just one teeny tiny, it almost looks like a burn spot where I might have just held the flame too close. But normally beeswax candles, they produce very, very, very little soot. So if you're getting a candle and you're being told it's 100% beeswax, but you're seeing soot collect all on the edges, it's probably not 100% beeswax. All right, so now I want to share with you kind of the opposite spectrum. I'm going to show you some paraffin and soy blended candles, and I'm going to show you how they're different from beeswax, okay? So this one right here is a soy blend. It probably is soy and paraffin. It doesn't say on the label, and even when I looked it up online, it doesn't say exactly what it is. All it tells me is soy blend. Okay, so when I see this candle, I don't see sooting, but it's barely been used. So that's good. But when you rub your finger against it, you actually almost get a residue on your finger, and it's very waxy and there's no squeak. So we know because the label says soy, but if you had a beeswax candle behaving like this, then you know it's not 100% beeswax. Okay, same right here. This is a paraffin candle. Again, it's barely been burned. I don't think it's ever been burned, so there's no soot that we can see because it hasn't been burned. But same thing, when I rub my finger against it, doesn't matter how hard I rub my finger, all I end up doing is getting wax all over my finger, and I get really sticky, tacky fingers. Okay, and then I want to share this candle. So I marked out the company name because it's a small business and I don't want to do any harm to any other small businesses. But this is one that I bought when I first started my beeswax journey, and this one, I bought it believing it was an aromatherapy essential oil 100% beeswax candle. Okay, and I didn't even realize until I started making beeswax candles myself that this was not, in fact, a 100% beeswax candle. When I researched it further, I confirmed that it was not a 100% beeswax candle. So on this candle, it says organic beeswax candle 100% pure. Okay, but it doesn't, I mean, it says 100% pure, but it doesn't say 100% pure beeswax. It just says 100% pure. But what I wanted to share with you is this candle's been burned almost the whole way down, and I wanted to share some characteristics of a quote-unquote beeswax candle that doesn't behave like a pure beeswax candle. So the first thing about this is it is fully adhered to the jar. So if you look in it, there's no lifting really on the edges. I couldn't fit a butter knife down in that jar. I mean, it's sticking to the glass really nicely. So it's like a coconut oil blend. And then the second thing is this had really, really high sooting. So you see all the black sooting on the edges of the jar. So that sooting means that there was something else burning in there. And then when I do my squeak, even with my other hand where I didn't use it, it doesn't squeak. My finger just glides over it. Okay, and then when I feel it, it's sticky and tacky. It's just whatever wax was put into this. And like I said, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with cutting beeswax with soy or coconut oil or anything else, but you don't want to be misled. And I feel like I was definitely misled because, I mean, it said organic beeswax candle 100% pure, but it definitely was not a 100% pure beeswax. So like I said, it's okay to experiment and try different things. I know a lot of people would do like an 80% beeswax, 20% coconut oil blend, and that's fine, that's great. But I think it's definitely important to label that on a jar because there's a big difference in 100% beeswax and then a beeswax blend. And even like big realtors are starting to do it. I think beeswax is starting to become a lot more popular with people. And there's even a new Target brand. It's called the Target Hearth and Hand with Magnolia. And they say on the label it's a beeswax blend, but when you research it further, Target released that it's only 20% beeswax. It's 20% beeswax, 70% paraffin, and 10% palm oil. So when you're buying a candle and you want to get a beeswax candle, just research it and you can ask a question to the person who made it. You know, candle makers are happy to discuss what they use, whether they are using it, what blend they're using, what's in their blend. Especially when you're going through a small business, they're more than happy to share. And so my piece of advice would be to just research as much as you can and take these tips, and these tips can help you decide whether or not you bought a 100% beeswax candle or if you bought a blend. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments about beeswax, 100% pure beeswax versus beeswax blends, I would love to read your comments below. Or if you have any video requests that you would like to see, I would love to hear about those in the comments below. Thank you so much. Until next time.